Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a PhD student at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, and I'm interested in information processing during sleep.
Yeah, hello. So I am Philippe. So as you deduce, I am the promoter of Rebecca. And actually we called our university the Université Libre de Bruxelles in French, because otherwise there is a confusion with our Flemish counterpart. And so that makes the association different. But so, and I am a professor at the Faculty of Psychological Sciences.
Thank you both. So now we just wanted to dive a little bit into this publication that was recently released. So maybe, Rebecca, you could tell us a bit about the paper, what really inspired the need to research it, why was this undertaken, this research study?
Sure. So just to give a little bit of background, whenever we listen to musical rhythms, we abstract some high-level properties such as the meter that emerges when we are listening to these periodical sequences of sounds. And for instance, this meter perception can be manifested behaviorally as the movement of the head when we are listening to the music, or tapping of the fingers or the foot. And these responses to the meter can also be reflected at the neural level. And this can be studied with a technique called EEG frequency tagging, where we can see that brain responses are prominent in the frequencies that correspond to the exact frequencies of the envelope of the sounds of the rhythm that we are presenting. So we use this technique for this study, and in collaboration with our co-authors Sylvie Nosaradan and Thomas Lenk, we decided to study perception of meter during sleep. And this is building up on research on meter perception during wakefulness. So what our collaborators have done is to present simple musical rhythms and study these frequency tagged responses. And what they have observed is that when listening to these rhythms, the responses at the meter frequencies are more prominent in comparison to EEG responses at frequencies that are also contained in the envelope of the rhythms, but are not relevant for meter perception. So using this method, we wanted to study these responses during all sleep stages, so non-REM stages 2 and 3, and REM sleep.
The findings or the conclusions that came out of this research, would you consider them surprising, or was it pretty much in line with your expectation going into this research?
Yeah, so on the one hand, we confirmed what was previously found during wakefulness, that responses to these rhythmic sequences are enhanced at meter frequencies. And this is regardless of the type of rhythm. So in this experiment, we used two different rhythms. One rhythm was a regular one, and the other one was irregular. They had the same acoustic properties, but the arrangement of the sounds elicited a meter that would rely less or more in the presentation of the acoustic events. So this means that in the regular rhythm, the perception of meter follows some acoustic cues, and in the irregular rhythm, these cues are less prominent. So the meter perception is thought to be more endogenously generated, making this rhythm more complex. And to get back to your question, what we found was that these responses are present during wakefulness, and during sleep, we thought that there would be like an overall reduction on the perception of this meter. And yeah, so we we could not find these frequency tag responses to the meter during non-REM sleep stages 2 and 3. But surprisingly, we found that these responses re-emerged, at least partially, during REM sleep. So I think this was an interesting finding.
What does that mean in terms of real-life application of this information or this finding that is so interesting when you explain it? But how does that impact us on a day-to-day level?
So our study adds information to the question of what are the perceptual capabilities of the sleeping brain. And given these capabilities, we can also ask the question of what other cognitive processes may take place during sleep or may not take place during sleep. And one example could be if we can learn during sleep and, for example, learning of new associations or extracting information from long streams of input, such as speech or music. And I think our study adds information on this important question.
For me, that's definitely interesting to know if that is even really possible to learn while still sleeping, you know?
Exactly.
I think there's always, not always, but previously, or when I was in school, the trend was to have the presentation or lecture and you listen to it while you sleep. So it would be playing even though you're asleep, and the assumption was the knowledge would be processed and retained during that time. So even without realizing the whole science behind it, years ago, I think this was very popular when I was in school.
And probably the best moment to study is wakefulness. And it is also good to have a good night's sleep before your exam. And yeah, even if we can still process certain information during sleep, probably this capacity is limited. And well, I would also like to point out that I think that there's also a difference between being exposed to new material during sleep as compared to presenting some cues during sleep that have been already associated during wakefulness. But still, I believe that the best moment to train your memory, for example, is during wakefulness.
Definitely. But then just to point out one final thing, and I guess you somewhat touched on it a while ago, when going through the publication in the abstract, it started with a bold statement saying, the extent of high-level perceptual processing during sleep remains controversial. Could you maybe touch on a few points as to why you stated it's controversial?
Yeah, so it could be controversial because so there have been different findings. On one hand, we see that responses to repetitive stimulation can decrease during sleep, but the brain still responds differentially to stimuli depending on the relevance or their salience. So whenever you present some names to the participant, and within these names, the own name of the participant, the brain responds differently to the proper name than other names. And this is the case also for familiar versus unfamiliar voices. And there are other studies that have presented like longer streams of speech and see that that there's no response at the level of higher order linguistic hierarchy. So there are responses only to the syllables, for example, but not the words or the phrases. And in a previous study from our lab, the capacity to extract statistical regularities within a stream of tones was also studied during sleep, and it was found that there were no responses to this more complex grouping of events. So that's why the statement is that it's controversial, probably, well, or due to different findings.
With regard to the last question, it is controversial also, because some people claim that you can learn much more sophisticated information during sleep, but it remains debated according to the different methods and finding and alternative interpretation. What we are sure is that we still process information minimally during sleep. That is, if you can continue to hear sound, to react to it, to simple. But what our findings are, and they are consistent with other findings, is that, okay, your ability to process this information remain quite limited. You will not create very sophisticated association. So that was a bit the case in what we see here. You can, during rapid eye movement sleep, still perceive a rhythm that is quite simple, but if it is much complicated, then you start losing this ability. And during non-REM sleep, it's even less than that. And so for us, it means that, okay, sleep is a state where you are sleeping, where you have to restore your function. So it's good that you can use that also for some cognitive function. For instance, consolidation, like Rebecca explained, and actually it is the heart of her research to study that how during sleep we continue processing information learned during wakefulness and how we can stimulate during sleep. Here it's a very different question. It's, can we learn something totally new and sophisticated during sleep? Which is a question, as you say, it was popular and it's still popular. You can go and find advert on Facebook for that, but it's not based on real science currently. So that's really important. As a scientist, I strongly believe that we should show things that work, but also that do not work, because it's important to keep in the right limit of what we are able to do. And as Rebecca rightly pointed to, the best time to learn is still wakefulness. It's a pity for the student, I know that, but it's the way it is. So that's a bit the... So for us, what was unique about the topic is that there is not that much study really looking at, can you learn something new during sleep? We know that we can react to things during sleep. It's a bit different than learning something. There has been some learning has been evidence, but it's only very elementary. Conditioning, stuff like that, which is good already. You can play with that. But
agreed.
Still, I will not start using that to try to have people learn their courses during sleep. It will not work very well, probably.
You mentioned, Philippe, that not much study has been done on this. So then I assume, Rebecca, that there is still, even after this publication, plans to still further study along these lines and do additional or more in-depth research.
It would be nice, but also, as Philippe pointed out, I'm also interested in answering other questions that are related to how presenting material, so for example, words or sounds associated to a previous learning, influences memory consolidation on the next day. So it's on the same lines, but yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic.
Sorry, it's still information processing during sleep, but they're more in something that is more currently established. That is the fact that we continue processing information that has been learned during sleep to consolidate it. It's something on top of what happens during wakefulness. It's not exclusive, of course, but that's really something we are really interested in, especially during rapid eye movement sleep, because there it's not yet very well evidenced whether it's possible to stimulate during REM sleep and what effect it has.
Thank you again both for agreeing to speak to me. Then I hope soon we'll be able to read another publication on this topic.